Media, Bristol Community College, or the City of Fall River.
Oh, well, another day, another dollar.
And CJ's fishing around for his mic. Okay.
No, I've got my mic on. That wasn't the issue. Your mic wasn't on.
Oh, there you go. That's why you were diving under the damn console. Okay. All right.
Yeah, it's kind of tough because we don't have that automation system yet up to date, and it creates some issues with this. But, you know, that's another story.
Yeah, well,
because we've got a lot of stuff going on,
Oh,
and
yeah.
last night the President of the United States announced his Supreme Court nominee, Judge Gorsuch. So he served on the U.S. Court of Appeals for 10 years, and he made several very interesting comments. I have the entire press conference here. It's about 30 minutes long, and I didn't have enough time here to go through it and start cutting and pasting. And when you want specific items, and I don't know exactly what people are looking for, it's kind of hard for me to pull it out. So this is where we need production meetings, but that's another story.
It is what it is.
Exactly.
We don't have a lot of time, but we can ultimately get them on another show, Friday show, or whatever.
Yeah.
But and everybody took what they wanted from this. It was,
they always do.
It was on TV, and a man, as Simon and Garfunkel said, a man hears what he wants to hear, disregards others. But obviously, this man has, extremely impressive credentials: Columbia University BA, Harvard Law School cum laude, with a Truman Scholar, Oxford University as a Marshall Scholar, he's got a BA, JD, and a PhD, I believe, and he's impressive academically. But I think when I looked at it, what really piqued my interest was when he said, and I know they all say this, but the fact is that when he said that at one point in the speech, right after he stopped giving his background and all the thanks and things, he talked about how a Supreme Court judge and a judge has to basically make rulings not on his own personal or political views.
I actually had that, and I just deleted it.
It has to be based on the rule of law. Now, I think that, and we do have a quote here, quote, "A judge who likes every result he reaches is very likely a bad judge, reaching for results he prefers rather than those the law compels." Well, this is what a lot of people in Fall River don't like, and a lot of the people that are running around screaming and yelling all the time, because when anything doesn't go their way, they want it reversed. Well, the fact is that in a perfect world, and look, he also, made another comment down the line about not allowing any kind of personal feelings in about it. He reiterated that their job is not, and it was very important. He said, the Supreme Court does not make laws. The people of the United States and Congress make laws.
Yeah, he actually said that was left to Congress to make the law.
Exactly, and the people. And he did say, and the people.
Yes.
He remembered that this is a country of the people. So those are the two issues that I really liked when he reminded everybody that you're supposed to make a legal ruling, not because you're the corporation counsel and you work for the mayor, and everything he says is okay, so you fashion an opinion to support his position, or to buttress it, as the lawyers like to say. You're supposed to make a legal opinion. And to me, the entire positions of corporation counsels basically smack of lack of, actually doing what the law demands, which is, really giving your nonpartisan opinion on the rule of law. and also remembering that the people in Congress make the law. But, you know, with that being said, I understand there's going to be a big fight. The other individual the Democrats had put up for the Supreme Court was well, at least from what I saw, and I didn't get into it deeply because it never came to fruition, but he seemed to me to be a very, very good candidate also. And then once they get on the bench, contrary to what they, you know, they'll say that they can't let their personal feelings or political views affect their rule of law on the rule of law. That is, you know, I mean, they're going to be perceived as partisan because it's impossible not to have your core beliefs influence an opinion. Because that opinion, you know, the only law that ever didn't need interpretation was Hammurabi's Code. If a building fell on somebody, you crushed the person the architect who designed that building with a giant boulder or something. You know, you did to the individual what he did to the victim. So if he killed the victim, you killed him. If he chopped off the guy's arm, you chopped off his arm. So we didn't need a Supreme Court and judges under Hammurabi's Code. But ever since then, we've had a court system. And I think most of you took geometry out there. And you remember a guy called Pythagoras, and he created the Pythagorean theorem. But what he also said was, which a lot of people don't know, is, and one of his more famous quotes is, "Man is the measure of all things." And what he meant by that was that we measure everything through our own eyes, through our perceptions that are ours and only ours. So, you know, if Adolf Hitler would have won the Second World War, Nazi Germany would have been perceived in history much differently. And regardless of the reality is, no matter what they do, whenever they make a legal opinion, they're going to go to their core values. If you're a conservative, your conservative perspective will influence it. As every attempt at being absolutely objective, which is why there's always going to be a massive fight over who gets put into the Supreme Court. But the reality is this appointment really doesn't change the dynamic of the Supreme Court, because this individual is highly educated. I'm sure he'll do the best he can to be objective, but he's a conservative, but he's replacing Judge Scalia, who was a conservative. So the dynamic of the Supreme Court will not change. That won't make the liberals happy, because they thought they were going to get a shot at putting another liberal on there and changing the dynamic. So fundamentally, if he gets confirmed or anybody else gets confirmed, which they will have to do over the course of the term, it's not really going to change the Supreme Court much, because you would probably say, unless this guy goes off the reservation and becomes a liberal, that most of his rulings would probably parallel what Judge Scalia would have ruled, because he's fundamentally, philosophically in the same, he has the same philosophy.
You know, but as he said, Scalia was a lion of the law, okay? And there were times when Scalia actually found for the liberal side, because guess what? The law said so. And he didn't say, well, you know what, I don't believe in that. And that's one of the things that Judge Gorsuch said, was that he is going to rule based upon the guide of law, and he will uphold the Constitution. He's not going to rule based upon the fact that, you know, a president said, no, this is what it has to be. He's not going to rule based on the fact that, you know, a political group or venue is saying, no, you must find on this side. He's not going to rule on the fact that, oh, this is an issue that, you know, civically we accept now, so we're going to change the face of it. A lot of people believe that the Constitution is a living, breathing, growing device that
Might
must be
grow-
allowed to
the way-
expand.
Yeah, well, it might be growing fungus right now
You
because
know?
of the way these people are interpreting.
Exactly.
No, look, CJ, I agree that these people, look, they're very well educated, they understand. And I think the majority of the time, and Scalia's gone over, he's made rulings that were contrary, as have some of the liberals. Not all of
Exactly,
them.
not all of them.
But see, the problem that I have, and it's my own personal opinion, but the problem I have with the Supreme Court is on some really, really, really super critical issues. Now, if you get a conservative judge on a Supreme Court and they're ruling on the person's right to, due process, or when we had the Miranda decision about informing people of their rights, I can see them maybe saying, well, okay, we're gonna kind of. They're pretty well on target, but there are certain issues, Roe versus Wade, i.e., where personal feelings, deeply religious people, it's hard for me to really have the utmost confidence. As I said, Pythagoras was right. Man is the measure of all things. We see people through the perspective that we have and how we view things. And the reality is that when there are certain, hugely important issues that deal with core values. You know the old saying, never argue about politics or religion. Well, when we get a political decision that affects religion, I really, and I know they would try. I'm not saying they're going to completely. They will have a tremendous tug of war with their own conscience. But the reality is their core beliefs and core values will, ultimately every single opinion by the Supreme Court is not correct. It's just their subjective opinion. And unfortunately, whatever they come up with, we have to live with. And he understood that. He said that, I think early in his speech, he said that, the decisions, their decisions affect the lives of every person in America and the quality of their life. So I'm not saying that this is an easy look. That's probably one of the most difficult jobs in the world, because you realize that you hold people's life in your hand in some cases, and that decision, I think every Supreme Court judge makes a really difficult and hard decision to, and they try. But my personal belief, I believe Pythagoras was right. I don't think you can, and I think that on some issues, especially when it comes to things like Roe versus Wade and stuff like that, hard for me to believe that those values don't enter into it, but we have to live with that. We do the best we can. We put people on a Supreme Court who we feel have the rule of law as basically, and you're right, Scalia was a lion of the law, and he fought vigorously for what he felt was right. And even if you disagreed with him, you had to respect the fact that he was willing to fight. So let's see what happens with this nomination. I think this is going to be a major crap fight.
It is. It just gets to be ridiculous. You've got the Democrats screaming that they're going to filibuster, and then they say, oh, well, then the Republicans are going to pull out the nuclear pin, and they're going to do a change in the rules to allow a confirmation by majority instead of by the 60%. And, but both sides have a problem with that change in the rule, okay? Because you pull that nuclear pin, both sides are going to have to live with it. And it's going to look, no matter what, that it is a political play. And the people just are not going to take that.
Well, it doesn't, not only looks like it, it is. And
it is, exactly.
It's absolutely all politics. And that really, to me, demeans the process.
Exactly.
The process was supposed to be there to ensure that we got well-qualified people, which, I haven't seen a Supreme Court justice that was approved that was like a bozo. They all had pretty decent legal credentials, you know, not even decent, you know, exceptional credentials. Now, because we don't, as the nominee said, there's no judge, you know, a judge who's happy, who likes every result he reaches is likely a very bad judge. And, you know, the process itself, those judges have to make rulings. And if they make them with the correct intent, you can't fault them. You can't be upset if a person makes a ruling that he agonized over for 6 months, and he makes a ruling and you disagree. And that's the whole problem that we have now. Everybody, all these political parties and the people in the country, we've gotten a country now, we've been called obstructionists, but talk about obstructionists. The process was there to promote the integrity of the appointee, not to become a political battleground where one party tries to get, to trump the other, that's a pun, to trump the other party so they can get their own nominees and stack a court. I hate to tell these politicians in Washington this, but the idea of the Supreme Court was not for you to stack it so you can get your way all the time. It was there to have a check and balance. The judicial system was created to have a division of government that when a question of law could not be resolved, we had an independent, nonpartisan body to come to a conclusion. But somewhere along the line, the politicians who forget about the taxpayers, who don't care about anything and think they are now monarchs, forget they are representatives of people, have forgotten what the Supreme Court's about. We live with the decisions, but they've made the Supreme Court a political battleground. Their job, in their eyes, is to create a Supreme Court that thinks just like them. If they're liberals, they want a liberal Supreme Court. If they want a conservative, they want a conservative Supreme Court. That's not what the process was designed for. Because as both conservative and liberal nominees to the Supreme Court said, it's their job to interpret the rule of law, not be political and not be partisan. So what we're seeing here today in the United States is just as anti-American with these nominees and what's gone on for years with these nominees, not what was intended to be. Just as every time somebody doesn't get their way, they're gonna file suits and they're gonna do everything, and he's wrong. And I got a very funny thing on my email yesterday. Somebody sent me a picture, and the caption was, it was a picture of the Great Wall of China. Don't start laughing, CJ, because I know you saw it. It was the Great Wall of China, and it said they built a wall in China 2,000 years ago, and it's working today. And it went on to say a couple of other things, but basically it was in jest. But the thing is that when we see what's going on now, lawsuits up it's crazy. Every time we don't get our way, we file a lawsuit and we walk out and we run around it. Look, if you disagree, work it. Isn't it amazing? I'm looking at this and I'm saying, Senator Warren said, President Trump's illegal executive order. She can use the word illegal. I know it's in her vocabulary. but when she talks about illegal aliens, she can't form it. She's like the Fonz when he had to say, I'm sorry. She can't say the word. It always comes out undocumented.
Yep.
Because it doesn't,
You must be looking at the 5-page press release from the Attorney General's office, Maura Healey, because they're filing a lawsuit against the president to challenge the executive order on immigration. And, on January 27th, President Trump signed the executive order citing the threat of terrorism committed by foreign nationals. But the AG's office, i.e. Maura Healey, argues that order is motivated by anti-Muslim sentiment and Islamophobia, not by a desire to further national security. My question is this: how can you say that? Are you Kresge? You know what I mean?
Well, that's
Kreskin,
Yeah, you're 100% right. I
got the envelope to my head.
And this is scary because this is our supreme judicial office here in Massachusetts.
Right.
The Attorney General. So, and she's filing a lawsuit based on her, psychological evaluation of the president's motivation. Guess what? If you were trying a case in a real court and you said that, you know what the first thing the defense attorney would say? Are you a psychiatrist or a PhD in psychology? Because I have a whole bunch of expert witnesses that have a different opinion of the president's motivation. That talk about an arbitrary and capricious lawsuit just to look good politically in a liberal state. Here you go. Now, she's saying she knows his intent because like you said, who is she? I am the great Kresge, Karnak the Magnificent.
That's right.
Remember Karnak the Magnificent?
Yes, I do.
I know one thing because I've been there, done it. When I was in court, if I was testifying in an arson case, and I said that the person who we were trying to prosecute to set that fire used gasoline as an accelerant, that defense attorney would jump up so quickly and ask me, "Are you a chemist? How do you know it was gasoline?" And if I didn't have a report and a chemical analysis, guess what? My testimony didn't mean anything because he'd say, "Who are you to testify? You're here as an expert witness in firefighting and cause and origin. Who are you to tell me, well, you think it smelled like gas?" You don't do that. You learn right away when you go to court that you have to actually support your argument. You just can't say, I think the president was motivated. Well, you know something? You can't get in his head, and for every person you can get to believe that he was motivated, you could get a whole group of people, the same amount of logic, that will say, I think he was motivated because he wanted to protect this nation.
Right. Well, this lawsuit comes out. The lawsuit claims that the executive order violates federal law and calls on it to be declared unconstitutional for taking the rights away from lawful residents as well as other visa holders without due process. According to the AG's office, the order discriminates against people on the basis of their country of origin and religion without sufficient justification, and therefore violates the equal protection guarantee of the Fifth Amendment. Additionally, according to the complaint, the executive order violates the due process guarantee of the Fifth Amendment, violates the Establishment Clause by preferring Christian immigrants over those who are Muslim, violates the Federal Administrative Procedure Act, and infringes on Massachusetts sovereign authority in violation of the 10th Amendment. We have dealt with this type of lawsuit before in the past. I don't know if her lawsuit has value or not. I'm not going to say it does. I'm not going to say it doesn't. That's left to the judiciary. But I will say one thing. We've been, I heard it the other night when the administration spoke about, I won a lawsuit because I was right in privatizing trash. No, you didn't win the lawsuit because you were privatizing trash. You won the lawsuit because you bought the vote of Pamela Liberté LeBeau to get the budget passed through. Because had that gone before the judge, before the budget had gone through, it would not have been funded. And it is illegal for you to enter into contracts without the funding source, like you've done with this branding campaign. You cannot enter into a contract without the funding in place. That is the law. That's what the lawsuit was about. So for all the zombies out there that say, you were idiots for filing that lawsuit because you lost. No, we lost because the city council funded the contract. They represent us, the people. Therefore, it's their fault, not mine, not the plaintiffs in the lawsuit. It is the city council's fault. A motion was made to table the matter until after the hearing. It got shot down. Had that motion gone forward and the hearing be taken up again after the court hearing, today that privatization contract would have been struck down. And the plaintiffs then decided it's not worth fighting this for 2 years for nothing because the lawsuit was based upon the fact that funding wasn't in place. So don't use your feelings, your emotion. Use the fact of law.
Yeah, well, you're right, CJ, but the fact is that, look, there's maybe some elements of this complaint, if they're talking about it infringes on sovereign authorities, it violates certain federal guidelines, they may be true.
That's right.
But that's to be decided by a judge. But the fact is, his motivation is irrelevant, and the Attorney General is not showing very good legal expertise when she prefaces the complaint by talking about someone's motivation, because guess what? The motivation is irrelevant in this case. It's just like if somebody does something for the wrong reason but it's legal, it's still legal. And when you go to court, they'll tell you that.
Right.
You know, maybe he did this to get back at you, but what he did was legal.
Therefore, you're out of luck.
Therefore, tough luck.
That's right.
And that's the key. And, you know, look, but when we come to the city, we segued into the city, but we'll hit this on Friday more. Look, they entered into an illegal contract. Again, a contract that actually technically may be null and void. The contract that they looked at with the paramedics and EMTs has a clause that puts them in Group 4. Well, they could not offer that in a collective bargaining agreement because they don't have the right to put them in Group 4. Only the city council, because they are exceptions in Group 4, only fire, police, and corrections. So they negotiated a contract, they ratified an instrument that actually had a clause that's illegal in it.
It's also, you can't bargain with that clause.
That's right.
You can't. So wait a minute now, we've got one contract with EMS, bargaining with something you can't bargain with. We have a contract with DCM with a settlement attached to it, which is leverage bargaining, which you can't bargain with.
You can't do that either.
Okay, so again, we have an administration who's governed by the law, but the law doesn't apply because the corporate counsel says it doesn't matter. But the corporate counsel won't sign his name to those contracts saying that it's legal. No, he says it's correct in form and content.
But technically it isn't.
That's right.
It
Exactly.
isn't in content because when you say you're going to move them into Group 4, and then you look at the law and say, well, they're not automatically in Group 4. The city has to accept the financial liability of putting them in to drive up the unfunded liability, which, by the way, the mayor was complaining about at the Niagara Neighborhood Association.
Yes, he did. He said it was $200 million.
Yet the city negotiates a contract that will increase the unfunded liability by allowing people to retire early. And they didn't have a right even to put that in a contract because they put, again, the cart before the horse. Just as he enters into contracts before the funding is in place, he enters into a contract and gives them a benefit in that collective bargaining agreement that he doesn't have the right to give them. The law stipulates that the city council has to do this. So what is he going to do now? Go before the council and try to pressure the city council into accepting, because they have the purse strings, accepting a contract that will drive up the unfunded liability that his minions, Kathy Ann Viveris and Mary Sahadi, are constantly whining about.
Right.
They go to the front of the council and whine about, oh, the unfunded liability retirement system is so high. We got so many, oh, it's so high. And he goes in front of the neighborhood associations and whines about it, and then he offers something to increase it. It's like when he says, I saved a bunch of money. Well, yeah, you saved a bunch of money by doing what?
Well, he also asked
Funny math.
he also asked for everyone to commit to a debt exclusion for the new high school, which isn't a new high school. It's actually going to be an academic tower in the middle of the existing building.
Which is a de facto override of 2.5.
Exactly. Hey, we'll see you on Friday. Stay angry.
Really angry.